It happened almost overnight. While one country slept, the other side drew a line in the sand. With a sudden, sweeping order and the stroke of a pen, the world's largest and most peaceful trading relationship was thrown into total chaos. We're not talking about some distant rival or a geopolitical foe. We're talking about Canada. The United States just hit its closest ally with a barrage of economic sanctions, a move that sent shockwaves through markets and boardrooms. But that's not the real story. The real story is what's happening right now behind closed doors in Ottawa. Frantic, high-stakes retaliation being planned. A counterpunch that could ignite a full-blown economic firestorm, engulfing both nations and fundamentally reshaping the continent as we know it. This isn't just another headline. This is the opening shot, the opening salvo. It arrived without warning, a political earthquake that ruptured decades of economic stability. On February 1st, 2025, the White House issued an executive order that basically declared economic war on its northern neighbor. The order imposed a crushing 25% tariff on nearly all Canadian goods coming into the United States. A few categories, mostly energy products like oil, got hit with a slightly less severe, but still punishing, 10% tariff. For the nearly $2 billion in goods and services that cross the border every single day, this was a cataclysm. Think about that for a second. The U.S.-Canada trading relationship is one of the most integrated on the planet, a deeply intertwined economic ecosystem built over generations. For this system, the tariffs weren't just a tax, they were a sledgehammer. As soon as the news broke, the reaction was instantaneous. The Toronto Stock Exchange went into a nosedive. The Canadian dollar, the loonie, tumbled against the greenback as traders priced in the looming economic damage. In corporate headquarters from Vancouver to Halifax, executives scrambled to figure out what this meant for their supply chains, their costs, and their futures. The calm, predictable nature of North American trade, a certainty that businesses had relied on for decades, simply vanished. Now, if your eyes glaze over at the word tariff, let's make it simple. Imagine you have an apple tree and your neighbor's a baker. You sell him apples for his pies and he sells you bread. It's a smooth system that benefits you both. A tariff is like your neighbor suddenly building a fence and charging you a 25% fee on every apple you pass over. Suddenly, his pies get more expensive to make. He might buy fewer apples or pass that cost on to his customers, making your bread more expensive. Or he might get angry and decide to charge you a fee for every loaf of bread. That's retaliation. Now just scale that up from a backyard exchange to one involving hundreds of billions of dollars and millions of jobs. That's the magnitude of what just happened. So what was the official reason for an act of such immense economic consequence against a friend? The White House didn't use traditional trade remedy laws, which require long investigations and proof of damage. Instead, it reached for a much more powerful and controversial tool, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA. This is a law that gives the president sweeping authority to regulate the economy in response to an unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security of the United States. Historically, IEEPA has been used to slap sanctions on hostile regimes like Iran or North Korea. In this case, the declared emergency was the flow of illicit drugs, specifically fentanyl, across the northern border. The executive order framed Canada as a pipeline for a national security crisis, a justification that was met with widespread disbelief on both sides of the border. Critics immediately pointed out that data just doesn't support Canada being a primary source of America's fentanyl problem. They argued this was a pretext, a convenient legal loophole to bypass Congress and impose sweeping protectionist measures overnight. It was a move designed for speed and shock, and it worked. The justification, however shaky, gave the White House the legal cover it needed to pull the trigger. The economic war was on. The world's longest undefended border was now a front line. And the question on everyone's mind was no longer if Canada would fight back, but how. The Canadian War Room. The moment the tariffs became official, the lights in Ottawa burned late into the night. This wasn't just an economic issue. It was a profound national insult and a direct threat to Canadian prosperity. In the Prime Minister's office, in the halls of global affairs, and at the Bank of Canada, an urgent and complex calculation was underway. A knee-jerk reaction would be satisfying but disastrous. A weak response would signal surrender. The path forward had to be strategic, powerful, and perfectly executed. Fortunately for Canada, this wasn't its first rodeo. The government had a playbook, one tested during a similar, smaller trade dispute back in 2018. The core principle was simple: reciprocity. But the strategy was far more clever than just matching the U.S. tariffs dollar for dollar. That would inflict just as much pain on Canadian consumers. No, the Canadian strategy was about inflicting political pain. It was about creating a counterstrike so targeted, so surgically precise, that it would turn American industries and politicians into Canada's most effective lobbyists. The plan unfolded quickly. Canada announced retaliatory tariffs on billions of dollars worth of American goods, set to take effect the very same day the U.S. tariffs began. The list of targeted products was a masterclass in political hardball. It wasn't random. It was meticulously curated to hit key sectors in politically sensitive U.S. states. Think Florida orange juice, Kentucky bourbon, Wisconsin cheese, and California wine. The list also included a vast array of consumer goods designed to be felt by everyday Americans: coffee, peanut butter, ketchup, motorcycles, and more. The message was crystal clear: if you're going to hurt our industries, we'll make sure the pain is felt directly by your most influential voters. But that was just for starters. Ottawa also published a second, much larger list of American goods that could be hit with tariffs after a short consultation period, threatening a massive escalation to maximize pressure on the U.S. to back down. It was a clear signal to American businesses that the pain they were feeling was about to get exponentially worse unless they picked up the phone and called their representatives in Washington. At the heart of this conflict is the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, or USMCA. This deal, which replaced NAFTA, was supposed to bring stability. These unilateral tariffs, justified under the guise of national security, were seen by most experts as a flagrant violation of the agreement's spirit, and likely its letter. The USMCA has rules for settling disputes in Chapter 31, where one country can challenge another before an arbitration panel. So why didn't Canada just sue? The problem is that process is slow. It involves consultations, panels, and lengthy legal arguments. A final ruling could take months. When your industries are bleeding cash, waiting half a year for a legal ruling is a lifetime. Plus, even if a panel rules in Canada's favor, the recommendations aren't strictly binding. The only real recourse is to suspend trade benefits, which is exactly what Canada was already doing with its tariffs. There's also a giant loophole. The Article 32.2 gives a country an exception for measures it considers necessary for the protection of its own essential security interests. It's intentionally broad, and the U.S. argued its tariffs fell squarely within this exception, making them hard to challenge through the normal channels. If one partner can just impose massive tariffs by declaring a national security issue, the entire deal becomes meaningless. It shreds trust and makes long-term business planning impossible. It also puts the USMCA's sunset clause into sharp focus. The deal is up for review every 6 years, with the first one scheduled for 2026. If this trade war poisons the well, it raises the very real possibility that the USMCA might not survive, leading to a full-scale collapse of the North American Free Trade Zone. That's the apocalyptic scenario being whispered in Ottawa, Mexico City, and Washington. The Canadian retaliation wasn't just tit for tat. It was a desperate attempt to pull the entire continent back from the brink. The economic battlefield. When you strip away the political maneuvering, a trade war is fought on the ground, in factories, on farms, and at the cash register. The consequences are measured in lost jobs and higher prices for families. The integrated nature of the North American economy, once its greatest strength, was now its Achilles heel. The economic battlefield was vast, but nowhere was the carnage more immediate than in the auto sector. The U.S. and Canadian auto industries aren't two separate things. They're one highly integrated organism. For over 50 years, parts and vehicles have crisscrossed the border multiple times during assembly in a just-in-time system. A 25% tariff doesn't just get applied once, it can get stacked at every single crossing. The results were catastrophic. The tariffs shattered the business model of North American auto manufacturing. Automakers faced an impossible choice: eat the massive new costs and watch profits vanish, or pass them on to consumers and watch demand collapse. Production slowed across the board, and layoffs, once unthinkable, became a stark reality. Economists warned that a prolonged auto trade war could single-handedly plunge Ontario, Canada's industrial heartland, into a deep recession. For consumers, the impact was just as clear. Higher production costs meant higher sticker prices on new cars, trucks, and SUVs, with some analysts predicting sales in Canada could fall by as much as 7.5%. The energy sector, even with a lower 10% tariff, was also hit hard. Canada is the single largest supplier of energy to the U.S. That 10% tax immediately meant higher costs for U.S. refineries and power plants, costs that were inevitably passed down to you at the gas pump and on your utility bill. For Canadian producers, the tariff squeezed already tight margins, threatening future projects and making them less competitive against other global suppliers. The irony? By taxing Canadian oil, the U.S. was raising its own energy costs and making itself more reliant on imports from less stable parts of the world. Agriculture became another bloody front. Farmers on both sides of the 49th parallel were caught in the crossfire. Canadian retaliatory tariffs targeted American produce, meat, and processed foods. American farmers who relied on Canada, their largest export market, saw orders dry up. The disruption to the deeply integrated food supply chain meant higher grocery bills for everyone. The price of bread, meat, and vegetables began to climb, hitting lower and middle-income families the hardest. The damage didn't stop there. Canada is a key supplier of critical minerals: the nickel, cobalt, and lithium essential for batteries and high-tech manufacturing. The tariffs disrupted the push to create secure North American supply chains for these materials, ironically making the U.S. more dependent on China. From softwood lumber for American homes to the aluminum in everything from planes to soda cans, the tariffs were a wrench in the gears of the entire continental economy. Which brings us to the most important consequence: the impact on you. Trade wars are paid for by ordinary people. The 25% tariff on Canadian goods wasn't a bill sent to Ottawa. It was a tax paid by American importers, who immediately passed that cost to their customers. Suddenly, everything from your morning coffee to your car got more expensive. The same was true in Canada, where retaliatory tariffs on American products drove up prices at the local grocery store. This inflation is a hidden tax on everyone, eroding savings and making it harder for families to make ends meet. The economic battlefield wasn't some distant place. It was the local supermarket, the car dealership, and the hardware store. The endgame, who blinks first? With tariffs flying and economies straining, the conflict settled into a tense, dangerous stalemate. The question hanging over North America was simple: who blinks first? This is a high-stakes game of chicken, played with the livelihoods of millions. There are a few ways this could go, ranging from a quiet resolution to a full-blown catastrophe. The best-case scenario is de-escalation. This is the path of quiet, backroom diplomacy. Behind the fiery public rhetoric, negotiators would work to find an off-ramp. This would likely involve Canada making some kind of concession, maybe on an unrelated issue, allowing the U.S. administration to claim a win and roll back the tariffs. It's happened before, but the scale of these tariffs makes it a much heavier lift. A more likely scenario is a long, grinding stalemate. The tariffs become the new normal. Both countries dig in, and businesses are forced to adapt to a world of permanently higher costs and broken supply chains. Companies would slowly and painfully reroute their operations, moving production or finding new suppliers. It would be a slow-burning disaster, a permanent tax on the prosperity of both nations. Then there's the darkest timeline: a complete collapse of the relationship. If negotiations fail, one side could escalate dramatically. This might involve the U.S. threatening to withdraw from the USMCA entirely ahead of the 2026 review. Such a move would dissolve the North American Free Trade Zone, triggering a deep recession in Canada and causing severe economic pain in the United States. It's the mutually assured destruction outcome, a catastrophic failure that would poison the relationship for a generation. This isn't just an economic contest, it's a geopolitical test. For decades, Canada has been America's most reliable partner. By targeting Canada with measures usually reserved for enemies, the U.S. sends a powerful signal to the rest of the world. No alliance is sacred. This could push Canada and other traditional allies to look for more reliable trade partners like the EU or nations in Asia. This trade war is about more than just dollars and cents. It's a battle over the future of the global order. So here we are, standing at the edge of a cliff, a 25% tariff shotgun blast from Washington, a massive retaliatory strike from Ottawa, with even more threatened. And in the middle, two of the world's most integrated economies and the livelihoods of millions hanging in the balance. This is more than a dispute, it's a crisis that will define the future of North America. So who do you think is holding the winning hand? Is Canada's targeted retaliation enough to force a retreat, or will the sheer economic weight of the U.S. win out? I want to know what you think. Drop your predictions in the comments below. And if you want to understand the powerful economic forces shaping your world, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. This story is far from over, and you won't want to miss what happens next.